Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the government of the Emirates, the United Arab Emirates, for inviting Brazil for this occasion. We're very happy to be here sharing ideas and opportunities with all friends from all over the world. And for this session, I would like to invite a few representatives from Brazil to join me for the discussions. First of all, let me invite Mr. Mauricio Borges, CEO from our promotion and trade agency from Brazil, Apex. Also, Minister Carlos Isioli, representing the Embassy of Brazil in the United Arab Emirates. We hope our ambassador is in a meeting right now. We hope in a few minutes he will be joining us in this session. Also, let me invite Secretary Alexandre Baldi, from the President, Chairman from the Council of Secretaries of Development from Brazil. Secretary of the State of Sergipe, please let's join us, Mr. Salminio. Secretary of the State, the Distrito Federal, the Federal District of Brazil, Mr. Gutenberg Uchoa. So with our group here, we have a few friends. After finishing the other meeting outside, they will be joining us here. So please let's have a seat. Thanks everyone for joining. So we're very happy to be sharing ideas and opportunities during this time. Also, we have a large delegation of Brazilian entrepreneurs and government officers this time with us in Dubai. So we have around 80 people in this mission at this time in Dubai for the annual investment meeting. And the key point for us is to share and exchange opportunities related to upcoming investments that we're foreseeing for the next few years in our country. Brazil is a 200 million people democratic state, and in a federative republic we have together 27 state provinces. Here with us we have 3 of them represented in this session. 15 of them, of those 27, are represented in our delegation, and they can be reached at the Brazilian booth, also in the exhibition area right next door. And this $3.5 trillion economy with very interesting economic stability and opportunities right now represent one of the, in our opinion, the safe havens to help the global economy reach out and rebound from the current crisis and I would say not so fortunate period that we're going through in the last few years. In this sense, the Brazilian 200 million population is a very young population. Brazil right now is going through what we call, and the economists call, the demographic bonus of the country. So right now the percentage of the active economic people from the total amount of population of the country is reaching one of the highest points. So for the next 25 to 30 years, Brazil is looking forward to seize this opportunity of the demographic bonus we're going through right now, and doing that in a way that we can promote the social inclusion in our country, promote the entrepreneurial prosperity of our entrepreneurs in Brazil and foreign investors also, the global integration of our country with peace, of course, and also with preserving the democracy of the conquered by the people of Brazil in the last decades. Economic stability of our country is also one of the key principles withheld by our President Dilma Rousseff, and our Minister Fernando Pimentel is one of the leaders of this, withholding this flag together with President Dilma. So fiscal responsibility, inflation control, and also preserving at the same time the stability by having today current international reserves of over $400 billion are some of the pillars that can guarantee to foreign investors and foreign partners the potential and the possibilities of our country even to grow even further. So Brazil is proceeding to realign, to redesign the economic structure of the country towards this entrepreneurial prosperity that I have mentioned before. And in this sense, some of the measures I would like to share with you addressed towards fostering this prosperity, they are on the dimensions such as, first of all, reduction of the interest rates of Brazil. This has been a dramatic effort from our government, and this has, of course, had a side effect last year, mostly, representing a reduction on the growth rate of the country. By changing the structure of the economy and switching from the speculative market, where we had money flowing, speculative money flowing into Brazil, focusing on reduction of the interest rates and promotion of economic development through entrepreneurship. Of course, last year we faced a decrease in the growth rate of the country. Nevertheless, we think that this is a short-term phenomena, and this should be very soon, and we have already reached the numbers for the first quarter of the economic landscape in Brazil. The numbers are changing completely once again, getting back to more interesting growth rates overall in the economy of Brazil. So changing from a speculative market to a production market is something that the interest rates had their role to play. Another important address from President Dilma was towards the reduction of energy costs in Brazil. And during last year, without breaking any contracts, either with local domestic investors or foreign investors, President Dilma has reached an overall cost reduction for power, energy, around 32% of the total cost of Brazil, which also means a better business environment for investing towards production and not towards speculation. Another key address from us was towards the direction of reduction of the labor costs, the tax burden on labor in Brazil. Today we have already included on this new tax model for labor, 47 industry sectors of the country, representing major segments that Brazil would like to see, to foresee. Please, just one quick stop here. I'd like to salute our friend Secretary Abdullah, to whom I would like to address the most thankful message for the government of the United Arab Emirates for hosting us at this occasion in Dubai. Thank you so much, Secretary. But so by addressing the labor tax burden, we have reached key segments of the country where we would like to see a new dynamics for growth and investment. And one of those that I would like to reinforce is on the logistics platform of Brazil. We will talk a little bit about the infrastructure investments of Brazil, but we have also reduced the tax burden on the logistics operations of the country. We have here with us representatives from our postal service, so it's not only the express delivery and parcel distribution in Brazil, but also all types of cargo and passenger operations for the entrepreneurs, domestic and international, operating in Brazil, will be benefiting from a new labor tax environment in this country. And another dimension is related to education. Brazil, and the President Dilma has a very special care on that dimension of education. Brazil has faced up front the challenge, and we, in 2012, for the first time in our history, have reached 1 million grads in the country of Brazil, 1 million graduate level studies finishing their programs in many different backgrounds, of course. This has reached to a new level of manpower, of intellectual capabilities for Brazil. Not only on graduate level studies, but also on technical level. We're now reaching around 2 million people. That number should be 2.5 million in 2014, but over 2 million people graduating in technical background in Brazil. Together with the local platform for education, for studies in the country, we also have a new program. It's called Science Without Borders, where Brazil is supporting scholarship programs for thousands of native Brazilians to study abroad. So we have partnerships with multiple countries throughout the world, where we are sending most talented young Brazilians to study and, of course, to spend part of their lifetime in a country abroad, where we can have also the construction of new bridges and new cultures and exchange and friendship with multiple countries throughout the world. Today the number has already reached 51,000 Brazilians benefiting from the program started in 2011. We hope to have, up until 2014, 100,000 Brazilians supported by the scholarship program Science Without Borders. So in this sense, and there are many other measures together with those, but our role is to provide the most efficient business environment for entrepreneurship in our country. And together with the foreign investors, foreign companies seizing the opportunity in Brazil, from the government side, we also tackling very fiercely the so-called bureaucracy in government. So reduction of bureaucracy is something that we're tackling directly. One of the examples I would like to share with you is related to the time for opening a business in Brazil, where we were evaluated by international standards as a country which would be one of the most difficult to open a business. Some places in Brazil taking over 100 days to start a new company, the formal process for startup. I would like to say, and it's very fortunate that we have Secretary Gutenberg with us here. In Brasilia, we have already established the process for opening a company in 48 hours with all permits for, including the municipality permits for starting a business. That's 2 days to start a business. Of course, this is for 90% of the companies, but some companies which deal with chemicals or inflammable products, this kind of dangerous and risky operations, they would follow a different process. But most of the companies would follow this express system in Brasilia, the capital city of our country, and also in multiple other states. I would like also to illustrate Secretary Baldi also has launched the process in his state, Goiás state, not for 48 hours, but for 24 hours, but the local permits should be negotiated with local municipalities. So it's also an expedite, express solution for reduction of bureaucracy and promotion of entrepreneurship in Brazil. Another point is the increase of foreign trade. So Brazil, of course, as part of multiple multilateral organisms, and our minister here is in charge of many of those negotiations. We're part of what we call a new global compact, where we want to build up growth, prosperity, without forgetting a peaceful, a friendly environment throughout the world. And in this sense, also one of the points I would like to salute with very much care, a very dear project for us, is the kickstart, the launch of the new flight between the United Arab Emirates and Brazil. As mentioned yesterday at the opening ceremony, flights can represent multiple possibilities for countries. So we already have multiple flights with the Emirates Airlines, and now we're starting with Etihad Airlines, flying from Abu Dhabi to São Paulo starting June 1st. This makes us very proud, and would like to proceed together with Secretary Abdullah, his team, in new possibilities also to other cities throughout Brazil, either with Etihad, Emirates, and other possibilities that we may find together with the government of the United Arab Emirates. In this sense, also with African countries, multiple initiatives going on. With the BRICS countries, the same thing, so on and so forth. So increase on the foreign trade and the cooperation is a must for Brazil. And of course, we should not forget to mention the strategic opportunities of Brazil in this specific moment. I think most of the people are aware on the mega events happening in Brazil. I would mention the Soccer World Cup, FIFA World Cup, happening in 2014, and the Olympic Games happening in Rio de Janeiro, 2016. But there are many other events happening in Brazil, and in this sense, many things going on urban mobility, on building up all the equipments required to cope with these mega events. And of course, on the services dimension to support these events, either security, catering, tourism, so on and so forth. Also, I'd like to mention the agriculture growth of our country. So last year, as I was mentioning, GDP did not do so well overall in the Brazilian economy. So it was a little bit less than 1% growth rate for Brazil. But it's very important to understand the numbers behind the number. And when we go to the retail market in Brazil, or agriculture market, or many other services in this country, logistics, so on and so forth, we see growth rates around 8 to 10%. Overall, retail market in Brazil grew 9% last year. Logistics around for airlines around 12% growth rate. Agriculture in Brazil, and here some of the states represented are part of this very important initiative towards producing food. Brazil is the #1 producer for protein to the globe. We're proud of that, and we're proud to be helping and partnering with multiple countries in this sense of food production. We grew more than 10%, reaching a production level of 184 million tons of grain in Brazil in this last crop season. So the agricultural growth, of course, provides us with multiple opportunities to flow out all this food production to the world. So we're talking about bottlenecks on ports, on roads, on rail, on hydroways, so on and so forth. And also a major driver of growth for Brazil is represented by the pre-salt oil extraction in our coast. This is a strategic initiative from the Brazilian government. Our oil company, Petrobras, is deploying over $200 billion of investments for the next 4 years in Brazil. And of course, there are enormous opportunities for international investments in this sense. Related to specific locations in Brazil, there are also very important regional initiatives, regional vocations. Brazil is an 8.5 million square kilometers country. It's a huge country. 5th largest country in the globe by geographic means. So in this sense, when we go from south to north of Brazil, the differences, the specific opportunities represented in this such a large land space, difference is enormous. And of course, the opportunities for entrepreneurs to pay attention, to study, and to seize the opportunity on each specific region are also enormous. What we as a federal government try to do at this time, a broad joint effort between the federal government of Brazil, multiple ministries, our agency, promotion agency, Apex, and all Brazilian local states has provided us with the opportunity to bring to this event. Yesterday, this document was launched in the presence of His Excellency, Secretary Abdullah, the new Brazilian catalog for business opportunities, for investment opportunities. So here we have over 300 opportunities with over $500 billion in value for foreign investors to study together with our governments and with our entrepreneurs in Brazil. I would like to mention the focus, one of the most important chapters of this catalog are related to logistics, either passenger or cargo, this is one of the points. We have already had a seminar yesterday and this morning at our booth, but we have all the expertise over there to share the content with all the interested people. And so by using this catalog, and also of course opportunities which are not represented here because they can be brought from our foreign friends to discuss with the Brazilian government and with the Brazilian entrepreneurs. In Brazil, this is why Brazil today is ranking, despite all the reduction in the global foreign direct investment, the total amount, Brazil has experienced a growth and became the 3rd largest foreign direct investment destination in 2012, with $65 billion of foreign direct investment being announced to Brazil. So in this sense, sharing the opportunities, the discussions with all of you and the other friends that we can meet would be very interesting for our country. So pillars are towards fostering the opportunities together with the private sector, promoting international cooperation in a friendly environment, and mutual investments, of course, from Brazil to other countries and from our friends from the globe to Brazil at the same time. So in this sense, this is an overview of our presentation. I think we have a few minutes for a Q&A, and also I would invite my friends to jump in and also complement some of the information that we have shared. As just a final note, for the ones that did not have the access to the catalog yet, I think we made it available outside, so when you leave, you can get your copy of this, and of course, there will be the electronic copy also to access it from anywhere in the world over the internet. So thank you very much. Looking forward to the Q&A session. Thank you. I don't know how this works, but I don't know if there are questions or...
My name is Matt from Investin, based in Shanghai. And I know you just mentioned that obviously the GDP growth over the past couple of years has been obviously not what you would have liked or would hope, but obviously better prospects for the future. But I'll say that you guys have very much been the admiration of many countries stemming from the Chinese inward investment point of view. As government representatives, could you talk a little bit about that success story of what you guys were able to do? Because we speak with countries every single day, and they're all trying to figure out how to reap that kind of investment from what China is doing now, about 100 billion per year. I believe your figures are somewhere up in the 20 billions. Yeah, if you could comment on that, that would be great.
So just for me, Matthew, just for me to understand, the key point is how to reach this kind of investment.
Yeah, how have you guys been able to attract such a large amount of investment, even though your domestic growth has been, I guess, not what you would like?
Well, coming from the private sector, I was invited to become part of the government in this term of together with President Dilma and Minister Pimentel. So, but I would say, changing hats back again to the private sector, money is scary. Money does not flow if they don't feel safe. They don't feel the opportunities in real terms. I think that Brazil and China, they represent destinations that are providing at the same time very interesting opportunities and a very safe return rates for the investors. So I think that the most interesting part of that is not by only providing opportunities, but the opportunities that in the Brazilian case, and I think that the Chinese government has also the same fortune at this time, is to provide this kind of opportunities at the same time that we are providing our people in the domestic market the opportunity also to increase the level of life standards, quality of life, social inclusion at the same time. So doing this together is not only good business, but also makes sense in the social side of the equation. So maybe this is part of it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Let me just take the opportunity to complement the answer by Secretary Humberto. Brazil, just to correct the number, last year received $63 billion in foreign direct investment. The previous year was 65. And over the past 5 years, from 2007 to 2012, while the world had a reduction from $2 trillion to $1.3 trillion in foreign direct investment, Brazil grew from 35 to 63, as I said before. So, yeah, the numbers are quite impressive. And I would add to your answer that Brazil had increased its middle class by 30 million people. So the internal market is becoming more and more attractive. And you see lots of investment related to the internal market and a lot of investment also related to one of our success factors, which is commodities and so on.
Hi, Joel. Cody Hablis from RAC Free Zone. I just got a quick question is, what part does the BNDES play in the economy or into Brazil and any part of foreign investment or into the public sector, actually the private sector? Maybe it's a good idea that everyone understands how the BNDES works. So
your name?
Cody Hablis.
Okay, thank you, Cody. Well, in fact, BNDES is a key part of the equation on the foreign direct investment in Brazil. I would ask Leonardo, our representative from the BNDES, also to jump in the discussion to share a little bit on how can BNDES be involved on it.
Thank you very much, Secretary. BNDES is the major player in long-term market financing in Brazil. I believe that we also have shares in more than 300 companies in Brazil, so we have a good prospectus of Brazilian economy and the investment plans of the Brazilian companies. I believe BNDES still will have a very important role to play in the next years, but it's important to mention that the investments plans are getting very huge and will demand more money. So, although BNDES will be acting as always as an important player in the long-term financing markets, I think there is room not only for the other financial institutions to finance in longer terms, up to 5-7 years, but also for corporate bonds. We are going to see an increase on the issuance coming from the Brazilian companies. So I think that capital markets in Brazil is get more mature, and there's room for everybody. BNDES will be playing an important role, but we expect to have more players on the market. Sure. The government and the financial institutions in Brazil are developing new instruments with tax incentives, project bonds, very interesting in terms of profitability. The returns are very interesting. I think there is a lot of instruments being discussed right now to attract other players to finance. Thank you.
I'd like to reinforce the role of BNDES. So just as an example, or a few numbers, in our catalog, we're introducing $500 billion of opportunities. But today, BNDES, I don't know if Leonardo has some more updated numbers, but BNDES today has a total amount of projects being screened, going through the process of investment to Brazil that represents $1.7 trillion of investments. Is the numbers, yeah? It's $1.7 trillion of investments from today up until 2016 in Brazil. So it's also a number that makes us very much proud and happy of the moment that we're going through in Brazil. And of course, that number backs us on the expectations that our growth rate will be not following the same standard that it had in 2012. So,
Mr. Minister, I'm from Vancouver, Canada, but we have an office here in Dubai. I represent a number of Canadian investors into the mining field, and we have looked at Brazil, and as you know, a lot of Canadians are into Brazil. But my question, I have a question, a statement. My question is this, that regarding the green and the carbon footprint of the Amazon, what is your government doing? Because we hear some bad press about the Brazilians cutting their forests a lot. And we have invested in Argentina in the Pirquitas mine, and we're trying to get Arab collaboration for investing in Africa and South America with us. We're the technical side with money, and then we want to go into South America and Africa. So the first question is the green carbon footprint thing, and number two is your mining policies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Canada and Brazil, I think they represent a very important bridge to exchange investments and expertise on the green economy. Two major countries that are very much focused on that sustainable economy, I would call it like that. In fact, the ambassador of Canada in Brazil had a meeting with us 2 weeks ago, and we should have a part of our delegation, in fact, will be flying to Canada on May 14. So I don't know if your organization is part of that mission taking place in Canada this coming week. But nevertheless, the directions for sustainable economy in Brazil, they are very strong. And I mentioned the reduction of bureaucracy in Brazil in multiple ways, but one of the ways that we would be reinforcing not the bureaucracy, but all the processes to make sure that the investments are complying with all green regulations is on that direction. So, of course, there's a very important challenge on the Amazon region. And the challenge is how to make local families, small businesses, economically sustainable without cutting the trees. And Brazil has got many initiatives going on that direction. I mentioned the growth on agriculture in Brazil on this last crop season, which is being followed by many records in the past. So we're growing very strongly. And that growth is based not on new areas, new fields for plantation. That growth is based on technology being applied to existing agricultural areas in the country. So we're not cutting trees to provide more food to the globe. That is a very important part of the Brazilian policy. So in this sense, of course, the Amazon region is enormous. In some places, we see that there's still local problems related to local families. It's not only, I would say, economic growth that is providing cutting trees in this process, but the problem is much more concentrated on how to generate the local sustainability, the economic sustainability of local families, than towards big businesses going on in the country. But it's a challenge. Brazil has decided to be a green economy. In essence, we are very much promoting the biodiesel and the ethanol industry in the country. We see here the state of Sergipe and the state of Goiás, two states that are part of the leaders of this process on the sugarcane industry in Brazil. And also there are many other technologies being introduced, either with coconuts and other types of oil vegetation, to provide us also with energy means with green origin. So I think also sharing the expertises with Canada is something that we're looking forward. I don't know if somebody would like to jump in and complement.
Okay, this is our last question.
I think the best way to preserve rainforests is to sell it to individual, but under condition, no touch, okay? Sell it to me, I'm willing to take, everybody willing to do in UAE and Gulf, sell me kilometer by kilometer, under condition, no touch. I put just one houses, I come for a weekend. I think this is the best way to do it. This, you could make enormous economy. People who own this area, they will sustain the local people. And I think this is the best way. But to make reinforce, you do this doesn't work. You need money. Sell land to each one, let him own it. But under condition, he doesn't touch this rainforest. You know, we are very jealous about your area. If we want to build something kilo by kilo, rainforest in UAE, it will cost us billions of dollars. Just 10 kilo by 10 kilos, more than $1 billion cost us to build it here. It costs us a lot to make just a little farm here. I think this is the best way. A lot of people willing to do this thing if we do it, okay? Without doing any investment, without doing anything. And thank you very much.
So I just want to give you an example about how can we grow in Brazil without Amazon damage. So in my case, in the state of Goiás has 36 million hectares. So for livestock and agricultural right now, we are only using about 10 million hectares in the state to produce. So we have a big challenge to increase the area for agriculture and livestock to provide the food for the world. So if the Brazil is the first one in the world to provide food, to provide, of course, most of the agricultural products, the central west of the country, where is the state of Goiás, Mato Grosso do Sul, and Mato Grosso, it is around 40% of the total country produced for agricultural and livestock. So we have a lot of areas available in the country to produce without to damage any other protected areas, even Amazonia.
Let me just compliment once again. I'm sorry, Secretary, but I have numbers here. Brazil, over the past 5 years, has reduced deforestation by 70%, 70%. So this is something that's very dear to us, to protect the Amazon forest. Of course, as pointed out by Secretary Humberto, you have to deal with the local families who are living also within the forest. So you have to provide for economic sustainability of these families. So it's not a very easy task, but 70% over 5 years, that's quite a feat. And if I may, just to complement the previous answers, Brazil, by different estimates, needs an extra, even though we got $65 billion in foreign direct investment, to grow 5%, based on a study that we conducted with the Boston Consulting Group. By the way, I'm with BRAIN, a Brazil Investment in Business and Organization. We can talk more about that later. But we conduct that study. Brazil needs between $150 to $200 billion extra in investment to keep a 5% GDP growth for the next few years. That's not going to come from foreign direct investment. We're going to grow, but that amount of money, it's not going to come from foreign direct investment. It's not going to come from banks, because banks' balance sheets are being limited, as you all know. It's not going to come from BNDES. BNDES, which is the Brazilian Development Bank, is topped out. I mean, it's reaching its limit. Even BNDES agrees to that. Now, it's going to come from the capital markets. It's going to come through financing through the capital markets. So look out for capital markets opportunities in Brazil. That's hopefully helped to answer the previous question. Thank you.
I think the rainforest is worth much more than agriculture and the other things. If you sell one of your birds, even under CITES, you could sell all these animals, maybe 5%, 2%. Just, I think, without cutting the trees and this thing, just sell the animal and plant it in this place. Even 1% is worth, it give you more money than selling under control law, under CITES, under everything. You get much more money than you do in agriculture and this thing. I think agriculture, we should do it in desert area where is the rivers and these things, but not to cut those big trees, which is took 200 years to grow.
This is just to agree with the comment. We all agree in Brazil like that. When we say local families, sometimes most of the times, in fact, we're dealing with native Brazilians that for generations and generations, they have lived in a certain way with a certain culture. And so that's part of their way of living. So by changing that that's what my friend mentioned, it's not a simple task. So we're trying to tackle, and of course, it's a land area which is really huge. So how to get there, to do the fiscalization or the new training and to transform the way of living, that's a big challenge. So it's capillarized in a very small pieces, but in a very large area. So this is the big challenge right now. The other side of the equation, which were the cutting trees for industrial or economic processes in a large scale, those are really facing a very hard time with the Brazilian government. So this is just to salute and agree with the comment from our friend. Thank you.
Well, our time is completely over, so I thank you for your attention, and I'm sure all the participants are there at the Brazilian booth to answer all your questions. Thank you for attending us.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, Honourable Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Just while we're waiting for the panel to take their seats, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for your attendance this afternoon. We are running a little bit behind time, so what I'm going to try and do is play a bit of catch-up. The aim of this important session is to look at corporate investment perspectives. Okay, so it's really about, this event is about investment. It's about attracting investment for the IPAs that are attending here. So it's a really critical session for you guys to understand exactly how companies are making their investment decisions. As I said, the aim of this really is to look at how the environment's changed. What are they doing differently? What are the push factors, the pull factors behind this? So I've actually we've got a very distinguished panel here who I'm going to introduce to you shortly. And we aim really just to touch on some really useful points so that you can take back from this. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ibrahim Turhan, who's the chairman and CEO of Borsa Istanbul. He's also president of the Federation of Euro-Asian Stock Exchanges and the World Federation of Exchanges. On April 1st, 2004, Mr. Turhan was elected as board member by the General Assembly of the Central Bank of Turkey. Mr. Turhan was elected as a member of the Monetary Policy Committee by the board on June 7th, 2006. He was appointed as Deputy Governor on May 8th, 2008. He also served as a member of the advisory board of the Contemporary Turkish Studies Chair at the London School of Economics and Political Science, the LSE, and the European Institute until the end of 2011. So thank you, Mr. Turhan. Next, we have Mr. Douglas van der Berg, who is the CEO and founder of Investment Consulting Associates. They're headquartered in Amsterdam. As a management and strategy consultant, he has assisted many corporate clients in successfully implementing their global investment strategies, location selection, as well as optimizing their global supply chains across the world. Some of his clients include Shell, Philips, Electrolux, H.B. Fuller, John Deere. He is considered as one of the leading global experts on site selection, incentives, and how to develop FDI policies for sustainable development. He has a strong interest and is committed to the Middle East, Africa, and developing country regions. So thank you very much, Douglas. Next up, we have Ms. Suad El Malem, who is Bombardier's chief country representative in North Africa. Her role primarily consists of planning and executing regional development strategies for Bombardier Aerospace and Bombardier Transportation, establishing and maintaining strong relationships with governments and key stakeholders, and supporting all activities in the region. Her mandate also includes the company's aerospace-level business development strategy in Africa. In recognition of her efforts, she was recently named Officer of the Order of National Merit by His Majesty King Mohammed VI of Morocco. Thank you very much, Suad. Next, we have Ms. Pumla Nakapai, who's the Deputy Director General of Trade and Investment Promotion at the Department of Trade and Industry in South Africa. Pumla is overall responsible for trade and investment in South Africa, which focuses on increasing levels of international trade, foreign direct investment, and economic cooperation on regional, continental, and international levels. She is also the Executive Vice President of WIPA. Next, we have Dr. Mohammed Chatri Basri, who's the Chairman of Indonesia's Investment Coordinating Board, BKPM, since June 2012. He is also the Vice Chairman of the National Economic Committee of the President of the Republic of Indonesia. Dr. Basri is a senior lecturer of the Department of Economics at the University of Indonesia and research associate at the Institute of Economic and Social Research at the Faculty of Economics, University of Indonesia. He is also a member of the Asia Pacific Advisory Group of the International Monetary Fund. We welcome you. Thank you. Finally, we have Mr. Michael Whitwell, who is President of Middle East and Africa for AIG. Michael joined AIG in 1984 and has held similar positions across the globe and is specifically responsible for expanding across the region in these developing insurance markets. So we welcome you. Michael is responsible for 21 countries across Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, Russia, Turkey, and CIS. So what I've tried to do here is give you an introduction to this excellent panel of speakers and look forward to hearing their thoughts. So how I'd like to open this session, if you like, I will sit down and make it less formal in a second. There was a 16% decline in greenfield investment projects in 2012. Okay, and this is from what we've seen from our data. And we are forecasting a further 20% decline in 2013. With the current economic malaise and declining growth prospects in key economic markets or key emerging markets, resulting in fewer greenfield investments, is greenfield investment continuing to be a key market entry strategy, or is the appetite for this waning? I'd like to put that to Mr. Turhan first.
Okay, thank you. Well, of course, assuming that your data is correct, I would I mean, suggest to look at from a different perspective. You know, in 2007 and early 2008, we spent a lot of time discussing whether there is a decoupling or not. As a fact of reality, after a couple of years following the crisis, it seems that there is a decoupling. And this decoupling is so deep that, I mean, if you look at the composition of the global output, in a 10 years' time, the change in this composition is really significant. I mean, the contribution coming from the developing and emerging markets, that was 20% maybe at the beginning of 90s, now is almost 50%. And if you look at in a PPP adjusted terms, you can say that half of the global output is coming from the advanced economies and half of emerging markets. When we say, for example, when we were saying cross-border investment or international capital flows, most of the time we tend to look at the flows from advanced economies to emerging markets, for example.
Sure.
But now we are facing with a new reality that is intra-emerging markets network. And I guess if we want a strong, sustainable and balanced growth, the key will be intra-emerging markets economic activity. And if we look from that angle, I would suggest, or I would assume that the figures may be a little bit different. So I wouldn't say that there is a decline. In contrary, maybe one should talk about an increase in the cross-border investment within the group of emerging markets. If you look at, I mean, global scale, yes, you are right. It's simply because of the decline in the economic activity in the advanced economies and the problems which cause suffering to the financial services industry in the advanced economies. But in the emerging market size, especially within or intra-emerging markets domain, the picture is quite different. And as Turkey, we are very concretely and in a tangible way, we are observing this.
Okay, so what you're saying is that although, yeah, on a global scale, investment may well be declining, but you're saying within emerging markets and intra-investment within that, that still remains very confident, very bullish. Has anyone else got anything else to add to that in terms of what they're noticing? Dr. Basri, sorry. Douglas, more coming to you, sorry.
Well, thank you very much, David. I tend to agree with the previous speaker. It is probably true if you look at from the in terms of this global number, there was a decline of this investment flow into the emerging market. But if we look at specifically about some countries, you mentioned about Turkey, Southeast Asia, and probably also some countries in Africa, I do believe there is strong investment coming in. And if we look at the global economic situation now, with the fiscal austerity measures in Europe, and also the fiscal cliff problem in the US, I do believe this quantitative easing, that injecting liquidity from the Europe may continue, will push the capital from the advanced country into the emerging economy. So in the case for Indonesia, last year we've been doing very well. We reached about 24.5 billion US dollar, in which the FDI jumped by about 27%. So some Southeast Asian countries actually benefited by this situation. So perhaps we have to look at about the target of the market more specifically rather than, you know, from the global perspective.
Perhaps Mr. Whitwell, yeah.
I agree with that entirely. I think what we're seeing is a real polarization, that if we look at some of our mature economies, I think the expectation of significant growth is not going to be there for many years to come. But if we look at the growth, although we would see in our business that GDP has diminished somewhat this year and last year from what it was maybe riding at, it's still particularly high when you compare it to the mature economies. So I think Turkey would be a great example of an economy which has grown quite significantly in a short period of time. And if you look at companies around the world, they're all thinking about Turkey in a way they just wouldn't have done maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So I think it's a change that's happening, and we're in that part of the evolution and maybe not seeing the end game yet.
Okay. Douglas, sorry, you going to add something to that?
Yeah, just a brief point on the numbers. And intra-regional FDI, I think, is a growing phenomenon. One of the things that we also see is that FDI is not always seen as the preferred market entry strategy for many companies. There are sort of the non-equity modes of foreign investment that tend to increase, especially to emerging markets, from emerging markets and frontier markets, where companies prefer another entry mechanism than foreign direct investment.
Okay.
Well, I share the same sentiments from the other speakers. Of course, there's been a decline globally, but from a South African perspective, we have experienced quite a substantial increase. And if we were to talk figures, our investment in 2012 amounted to, or we're close to $6 billion US dollars. And the sectors include manufacturing, mining, as well as the green economy in relation to our integrated resource plan. And we've also made an observation where a number of multinationals have confirmed South Africa as a hub and a gateway into the African continent. And some of those companies include Nestle, Procter & Gamble, as well as Unilever, who have confirmed that status for South Africa as a gateway into the African continent. They've made quite a number of investments, as well as recent announcements have been made in terms of what they want to invest into the South African economy.
Hi. My intervention, it's more about, as I would say, the practical point of view from high value added sector in terms of choosing greenfield. The idea is really the fact that we still need it for many reasons, for all the reasons, and after all the macroeconomic information that we just had from our colleague, there is a practical point. It's important for us to have this new, from scratch, something that we start from scratch to make sure that the integration for the new entity using the workforce, that they're educated but not totally skilled, and the coaching of those people, making sure that you include and you implement properly the corporate culture, makes this greenfield a really successful implementation.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I think that kind of dispels then the kind of malaise, if you like, in terms of, on the one hand, we're hearing that FDI is declining, it's all doom and gloom, but what we are seeing is inter-regionally, particularly in emerging markets, there's still a lot of confidence there, there's still a lot of growth, and greenfield is still very much here for the future. I mean, Douglas briefly touched on it in his response, which was what other market strategies are being employed at the moment. I think, obviously, from your side of Bombardier, it's very much geared around greenfield and so on. But there are other market entry strategies, particularly reflected in the UNCTAD data, which we're seeing being adopted. Douglas, do you want to share a bit more light in terms of what you're seeing from your side and the companies you're working with? Are they considering other market entry strategies at the moment?
They are, especially if you look at some of the emerging market multinationals. They look for strategic partnerships, they look for matchmaking in other markets, depending obviously on the maturity of the markets. If it's frontier markets, they tend to obviously prefer the more greenfield related investments because they have to start operations from scratch. But to other markets, they prefer to enter a market through mergers and acquisitions, even joint ventures and strategic alliances. And in fact, in one of the next sessions, some of the data show that while FDI has declined, the other partnerships modes of foreign expansion of companies has increased substantially. And these are especially the emerging market multinationals or multinationals from the more frontier developing countries, developing economies.
Okay. Excellent. And is this being reflected from an IPA perspective? Are you guys seeing that, when people are approaching you and working with you to help expand your markets, are you seeing there is an increase in different forms of more traditional market entry strategies? Are you seeing new increase or an increase in new formats for that?
Certainly, there's been an increase from our perspectives, and we've seen different strategies employed. Others are initiated by the private sector, others are initiated by us. And this is also evident if you look at the mix of the investors that have come into the country, which is a mix from a developed perspective as well as from the emerging economies. So there's quite a mix of strategies that have come up. Of course, we encourage, from a South African perspective, local participation, which is helping us in terms of addressing our developmental challenges within the economy as well as within the continent.
Okay, good, excellent. Moving ahead, Mr. Tahan, I mean, in terms of, if you look at Turkey, for example, I think there's an excellent case study in itself. You know, despite efforts that have been taken by the government to join the EU, being scuppered by other EU nations, Turkey's actually managed to be tremendously successful. What do you think is the reason behind that? What are the key characteristics you think Turkey's done particularly well?
Well, I would resume it in 3 words. First of all, credibility and predictability. Let me give you just one example. In 2009, which was a bad year, as you can imagine, it was the case all over the world. In the middle of the crisis, while everybody else was talking, especially in advanced economies, was talking about fiscal expansion to cure the problems related with the financial crisis, the government in Turkey launched a medium-term program, which was including a fiscal and monetary tightening whenever necessary. And they proved it, although it was an election year. So everybody, I guess, saw that there is a credibility in the policies, and the policy making will not allow any kind of, how to say, going out of the track, diversion from the right path. So of course it really contributed the market perception. And the second one, of course, and so the credibility and predictability is really important, I guess. For example, when you look at what is taking place in EU, especially in Cyprus, when you take such decisions, you kill the predictability, you kill the credibility, and it is very easy to destroy it, but very difficult to restore it. The second is the fiscal performance, I guess, because thanks to the measures taken, the debt to GDP ratio is now below 35%. And if you look at the net foreign position of the public sector, Turkey is no longer a debtor, but has become a creditor, net creditor, as the public domain, public sector. And the public sector deficit to the GDP ratio in EU-defined terms is less than 2% now. So all those figures really, I mean, contributes in a very significant way to the market perception about Turkey. To give you another very tangible outcome is that when I was here for the last time in October, Turkish Treasury very successfully accomplished the issuance of a 10 years maturity sukuk, and the rate was only 180 points above the benchmark, which is the US similar maturity securities. Third, but last but not the least, is the keeping structural reforms to continue. And in that regard, for example, I should maybe talk a little bit my institution, Borsa Istanbul, which used to be a public entity, now is transformed into a joint stock company where the public ownership is below 50%. So it's a private company, and we are establishing strategic links with all major financial centers in the world. We are looking for strategic partnerships with advanced markets, advanced exchanges. We are expanding our operation to include vertical and horizontal integration, post-order, pre-trade, everything. And we are creating a whole range of spectrum which will include any kind of financial contracts, including commodities, electricity power contracts, gold, precious metals, diamonds, cash equity, derivatives, bonds or related derivatives, currency and currency derivatives, everything. Within a single platform, single access point, single technology, single and integrated collateral management. So this itself creates an attraction, and of course taken into consideration that Turkish economy is the 16th in the world, creates a natural center of gravity in the world. Demographics are benign. All other macro data suggest that things are in the good direction, developing in a good direction in this country. So this is, I mean, a general maybe figure, general picture of the factors behind the success of Turkey.
So credibility, predictability were the two really key messages that came through. Okay, interesting. And in terms of your role with the Borsa Istanbul, are you working much with the Turkish companies? Are you listening to what they're saying? I mean, do they have, what are their key concerns and challenges? What's their economic outlook right now? Is it pessimistic, optimistic? What are they thinking?
Well, very, very optimistic indeed. And it is seen not only from the domestic perspective, but perspective from abroad suggests the same. For example, last year, I mean, you would, remember, it was not the best year we had. It was really disastrous, especially from the perspective of the capital markets and exchanges. Last year we had 26 IPOs. So I guess it is remarkable. And since the beginning of this year, for example, only in terms of the corporate bond market, what we accomplished in terms of the issuances by the companies has already exceeded what we had for the whole year in 2012. So it continues like this, and it's because of very, very simple reason. The government is releasing more and more liquidity to the market, and market is using it in a more rational way and more productive way. And foreign investors are observing this, and they put their own money as well.
So the government's helping to spur confidence.
Exactly, exactly. And when it comes to the listing issue, for the time being, we have 407 companies listed in Turkey, which makes a total market cap about $400 billion US. But for example, the daily turnover in terms of the liquidity is almost $3 trillion US. So I mean, very liquid, especially actually to be more precise, fourth in the world, member of World Federation of Exchanges members. And we launched a new initiative we call Listing Istanbul. We call all companies from especially neighboring region to be listed in Istanbul without looking whether they are already listed or not. It may be double listing, or it may be their first listing. So we are using those strategies to expand our operations.
Fantastic. Okay, let's bring it back more on the theme of obviously corporate investment, the strategies that they're employing. Ms. Eminem, I mean, obviously Bombardier retains an enviable position as a leader within the aerospace industry. You have a clear strategy for international expansion, and one of this is obviously to establish a manufacturing facility in Morocco. What were the key reasons to why you chose Morocco?
Actually, I'm going to start to answer to your question, David, by explaining the type of investment we do, because more than the manufacturing, of course, we expand our footprint over the world for our service, spares depots. We do a lot everywhere in the world to make sure that we're giving the best quality of service to our customer. So from this perspective, we are really where we need to be to make sure that we're giving the right service to our customer. In terms of manufacturing, of course, we did a lot of studies making sure that we're choosing another place in the world after Mexico to expand our manufacturing footprint. After due diligence, we analyzed and we came out with conclusion that this region of the world, which is Morocco, that it's a door for two things important. Europe, so actually it's important for us to be in the same time zone. Morocco, having Morocco in the same time zone as our facilities in Belfast is really important for the integration of our supply chain and the logistic around it, which is an important point. The second thing is Morocco being geographically a door to Africa too. It's and the African markets. It's an important one too. And in the same time, we can see that Morocco has this strategy of making sure that there will be a hub for Africa. There is things. It's very doable because there is a lot of things going on. It shows that it's going to be serious. And for now, they have the necessary and they have the minimum to make it happen. And for us, it's important to be linked to a partner that has a vision about his future and the industrialization of his country. So from this perspective, that was a point. So there is other practical points from a manufacturing point of view. I would say there is, of course, the workforce. Yeah. The workforce educated, of course, not necessarily specialized, but as a greenfield, we took on us to make sure that we complete what's needed in terms of coaching and specialization. So let's make it a good partnership and making sure that we have the right pool of workforce to do the job that we need to do. For sure, there is other elements that they are related to the logistics, the quality of the infrastructure in the country, how the country is working hard to make it happen, and the logistic around. So traveling or using the logistic from Morocco to Europe, it's about hours, not even talking weeks, which is really important for us. There is the political stability. It's important. And for sure, when we signed with Morocco, it was 2011. It was in the middle of many things happening in the area, so it was tough to make a decision, but it was in the same time easy to see that Morocco was a part of that, and was assuring for us to go forward. There is another point. It's really related to the fact that Morocco has a better climate and a good climate to do business. It's easy to do business, and for us was important because it's an important investment, and in high value added sector, you need to make sure that you don't have a delay in your project, and this is what makes the high value added sectors very specific, because making t-shirts is one thing, but making part of aircraft and how the chain of supply chain is really tight, it not allows you any being late or something like this. It's need really to be well controlled, and I think we felt very good about that in Morocco. So for sure, having the Moroccan government really committed to develop his own strategy in terms of industrial strategy overall. They have this emerging, this plan émergence, they call it, which is a real strategy about the industry, interesting one, and it's by sector, and aerospace, it's one of the sectors. And it's really well done, and they're delivering as a plan. So I think it's really assuring for investor to make sure that they are partnership with the country, that they know what they're doing and they have a vision. Okay. I think it's...
So really on that point there, it's about making sure that it's a stable environment, it's got full support and backing, you've got the availability of all the key characteristics that's being clearly communicated to you. So, Mr. Whitwell, on that one, I mean, I think just building on what Ms. Almalem just said just now, AIG obviously has plans to expand further within Africa. Can you share a bit more light in terms of what characteristics your business looks for in a location?
Sure. First of all, I think you can distinguish greatly between entering a mature market and a developing market, and I'm really going to concentrate on talking about developing markets. But just as a little background, as the largest insurance company in the world, we've kind of a rich heritage of being around for 90 years, but we're also in about 90 countries. So many of the markets we would now consider to be developed were in fact emerging markets when we went into them all those years ago. So I just look at it, it's almost like a cyclical thing. We're coming around again and we're now looking at new markets. So many of the generic things that my colleague here from Bombardier talked about would apply to us as well, but specifically to the insurance industry, I think the first thing we would look at is the penetration level of insurance, which typically is very, very low in markets that are underdeveloped or developing. And that means also looking at the share of wallet. How much do people actually spend on insurance when they move into being a buyer? So that links neatly with population. So for me, where is the population? What is the size? Is it urbanized? Is it moving to the big cities? What does the population think of in terms of, where do we look in terms of things like credit cards? So if we're selling a product, how will the product be bought and how could it be distributed? Of course, the economy is important to us, not just the size of the economy and the GDP, but the diversity and the industry types and the industry groups that would interest us to move into that kind of country. I think in terms of the distribution for us, it's probably fair to say that people don't wake up in the middle of the night and say, I must buy that insurance policy tomorrow. So for us, it's about how do we get to the market. So it's about having the talent inside our organization and outside our organization to distribute. So we look for who the people are, what the talent base is on the ground. Are there people like banks? Perhaps telephone companies would be a major distribution source in some emerging domiciles. So without that, it makes it difficult to move. At the other end of the spectrum, I think we've mentioned political and social stability, key driver for us. Ease of entry, ease of doing business. But for us, we look for a market that might be saturated. So it's great if it's an emerging domicile, but if it's already full of insurance companies, what value can we add and what market share can we make? And finally, the key driver for our company is how do we sustain and build what we might call risk-adjusted profit over a reasonable period of time. Otherwise, it sounds good, but it doesn't move the needle for us.
Thank you. I think these are fascinating insights that you're obviously providing to those in the audience from an investment promotion perspective. Just to get a bit of feedback back from yourself first, representing South Africa, you've heard some fascinating insights here. How do you typically tend to, when you're approaching companies, what's the first type of, how do you approach what's your initial approach to doing that though? Obviously it's to find out a bit more about what they're trying to achieve and so on. Listening to this one here, there's similarities in what they're saying, but also two different kind of drivers. How are you responding to that? How does your team respond to this?
Okay, thank you. Firstly, I'd like to make a comment about the investment, without displacing the investment that they've considered in Morocco. I was wondering whether it was a lion or a gazelle in the race, if you recall from yesterday, from the opening, because my view is that South Africa meets all the requirements that they have, but it's a separate discussion. So I was thinking, how did I miss that race when you were considering? Well, from a South African perspective, trade and investment in South Africa is the first stop when you talk of investment into the country. We've got a number of states of provinces, which are 9, which are also mandated to promote investment into the country. We have considered a dedicated service when potential investors come into the country, begin to outline the policies. For instance, they spoke about political stability. South Africa is well known about that. We look at the financial systems that are there. we've got sound financial systems, we look at our also legal system, we begin to articulate and unpack such policies to an investor. Of course, one may look at the rankings. I think the colleagues alluded to some of the rankings that are considered by the World Bank of these days or other people who assess us in terms of how we're doing or how we're faring in terms of ease of doing business. We begin to articulate that. We begin also to look at the entire government policies that have been put in place in terms of ensuring that investment is attracted into the country. Of course, we've got a suite of incentives. And we also outline those and how they're going to service a particular investor into the country. I can cite a number of examples where we didn't have a particular suite of incentives, but by getting to understand what the investor was looking at, we're able to attract and retain that investment into the country. One of the things that we've also done is to look at how we become competitive in this space, because South Africa is not the only emerging country in the world. So we've looked at a number of intervention measures. For instance, we've just recently made an announcement on the establishment of special economic zones, which are aimed at attracting investment. And what we intend to do is to ensure that at the end of the day or at the end of a century or whatever, we've got a diversified economy. We want to spread the activities within the country across a number of sectors. So we've looked at that. We've also looked at how we encourage companies. Earlier on, I alluded to the fact that some of the companies have made this decision of considering us as a hub or as a gateway into the African continent. How do we entice them? How do we talk to them to ensure that they buy into that? And a number of measures have been looked into. Recently, we've had an announcement from our central bank in terms of relaxing regulations in terms of cross-border interventions into the African continent. How do we ensure that we've got interventions that talk to our BRICS partners in terms of getting investments into the continent as well as across the continent? So we look at a number of issues. We promote, we facilitate, and the most important thing that we focus on for investors into the South African economy is the aftercare. We begin to talk about their expansion plans, how long do they intend to stay into the South African economy, and also expanding into the African continent. So there's a number of issues that we look into in terms of attracting and retaining investment into the economy.
Fine. Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. I mean, Dr. Basri, before I come back to you in a second to give a case study of Indonesia, because obviously that's one of the key growth markets, I think you touched on a point there that I just want to go back to Ms. Almalem and Mr. Whitwell with, and that's the issue of incentives. But more importantly, from your experience, I mean, you may have had limited or you may have had a lot of involvement with the government institutions, but what do you personally, you're here as the investors, what can governments do to promote further investment? What do you think the key things, what are the key considerations you think they could be doing to help?
Yeah, before to come back to my colleague here about her intervention, maybe I'm going to do it right now before to forget. I missed the portion that she was referring to about yesterday in the opening, but I'm going to remove my hat of Bombardier and going to put my hat or my heart of African. I'm going to just tell, I don't like the word race at all, and I think there is business for everybody and we should work together. North Africa, South Africa, Africa, everybody for Africa. I think it's now time not to stop to think about race and who will win what is not important. What is important is to bring the business to Africa. So, and there is need for collaboration and cooperation because we need the brain for African from north, from south, in the middle. That's important. So that's it for this one. For your question, David, yeah. I think I'm putting my hat of Bombardier now. What the investor needs, it's for my perspective, especially for the high value added sectors, is more than the incentives. What's needed really is to have the right climate, to have the right logistics, to have the right support, to have the skills, the people's skills, the training, all what's needed in this critical domain is not about money. I don't like to talk about money because my preferred quote is best cost instead of low cost. Because there is, yes, there is, in investment in general, we talk about low cost. Everybody is chasing low cost. But in high value sector, added sectors, I prefer rather than to include all what I just mentioned about what's needed for the investor, I prefer rather than talk about best cost than low cost.
Sure. Okay, that's, Mr. Whitwell, do you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I think we've, as a company, we've been in the Middle East for over 50 years. We've been in Africa for 50 years too. I think generally governments have a good sense of what's needed to attract FDI to their country. But the kind of things I would add and think about would be maybe some way of helping navigate through the process and navigate into an entry of a country, perhaps flexibility in terms of recognizing that maybe a multinational has different needs and different drivers than a local entity, and recognizing that the blend of the two may work very well for the country, and that I think you could bring global expertise to the industry. You're certainly going to bring best practices in terms of governance, and one of the things that it should help is to develop talent in an industry perhaps in its youthful state. So I think overall it's just recognizing different drivers and helping people ease their way into a country. I would finish with one other thing. Maybe sometimes it's been a little slow to get through some of the things. I think that goes with the navigation, but speed and navigation would be the things. But generally, I think there's a good sense of what to do.
Okay, excellent. Just touching on a point that Ms. Elmelen made there about it's more than incentives. I think that's a really fair point. I mean, Douglas, I wonder if you could give us a bit of insight in terms of, first of all, kind of the clients you're working with, but also you have an intelligence tool that kind of looks at tracking incentives that have been awarded. Can you give us a bit more insight in terms of what you're noticing from what you're seeing?
Certainly, thank you, David. In terms of just a general statement in terms of costs, best cost, I think, is a quote that we've heard as well. Cost competitiveness, that's also what many of our corporate clients are saying. Some of the most recent projects that we have done were actually where we had a short list of a number of locations, and the projects, even in the more lower value-added activities, went to locations that were not the lowest cost ones, but were the locations where the ease of doing business. I'm not referring to the World Bank statistics, but the more general perception of setting up facilities. The services provided by investment agencies were at a very good level. The education systems were in place, the talent, the skills and capabilities were in place, the productivity levels of people were there. They were much more important, so it was very subtle, it was very difficult to capture that in one number, but it just, for many of the corporate clients, they said, well, it just feels better in this location. People tend to be able to speak our language, they understand the business case, they can facilitate the services that we need. Instead of the other locations, and I'm not going to mention any countries or locations here, where it was just only about cost, and costs were, obviously they were important, but many of the corporates said, well, let's focus on the things where we can set up our facilities within the 6-month or 12-month time frame, and where in 2 or 3 years' time we are still cost competitive versus our peers in the industry. So they were looking more ahead. They were taking a more longer-term perspective, not 2 to 3 years, but even 5 to 7 years. And I think that's also crucial in terms of looking at attracting foreign investors to specific markets. Secondly, stability, transparency in policy making was crucial in countries where investors sensed that the policies that were in place were no longer there for the next 5 or 10 years. It tended to be very detrimental in terms of attracting those type of investments. Stability is one of the main topics that is on the agenda for many boardroom discussions. Which economies are stable and credible enough to attract and host and absorb investments. Then the third point in terms of incentives, they are important in some projects. Nevertheless, we tend to always emphasize in these type of conferences and panels, they are not the key driver. We've never, ever seen a project where incentives are at the forefront for any location decision. And I think the role of incentives will even diminish. You can have a very nice incentive package in terms of a zero corporate income tax rate, but if you don't have the the people available for a specific project. It's never going to materialize. Secondly, many of the incentives are not very much tailored to the requirements that companies are looking for. For instance, if you have a very general corporate income tax exemption, that is very nice, but if the company is not going to make a profit in your location, it doesn't make any sense. Tomorrow's session, obviously, on incentives is going to talk much more about what needs to be in place to have a sustainable and effective incentive framework. But from a corporate perspective, they are not the key driver in any foreign investment decision.
Excellent. Thank you, Douglas. Dr. Basri, I'd like to bring you into this discussion in terms of, we've heard the case study of Turkey, we've heard to a certain extent about South Africa. Indonesia is really experienced a very, it's a time of growth, a time of prosperity, it's a time of opportunity. Can you just give us a bit more insight in terms of what you think the key characteristics are for Indonesia's growth? I mean, we heard Douglas talk about the ease of doing business, the education, the productivity, the sustainability, providing a sustainable environment. How are you meeting this challenge, in Indonesia? How are you getting your team at BKPM to communicate this message out?
Well, let me be frank and honest with you, David. I think one of the reasons why Indonesia is back into the radar screen of investment in the last couple of years, because two factors: good policy response and good luck. Yeah. Let me describe a little bit what I called by good luck. As I mentioned to you earlier, with this global situation like this, in which we got a problem in the advanced country, in the US with the Euro debt crisis, the capital will flow to emerging market, and people start to look at about the country which provide the relatively high return. Despite all still problems in developing countries, I would say Indonesia is the least unattractive country in the world now. You got to see problems of the bureaucracy, you got to see problem of infrastructure, but our economy still grow by about 6.2%. Whereas other places of the world are struggling with 0 to 1%. So this is what I call the push factor. It's really push out the capital out from the advanced country into the emerging market, the Southeast Asia, for Indonesia. In addition to that, some issues, pull factors, like the young populations, the demographic bonus. We are a country with 240 million people, in which 50% of the population, the working age, is less than 30 years old. Now, we are talking about consuming class in Indonesia is about 45 million, which is projected by 2030 will become 135 million consuming class. We are talking about opportunity from 0.5 trillion to become 1.8 trillion US dollar in the next 15 years. So basically, we are talking about this economies of scale, about size. The other reason why people start to look at Indonesia is also because good macroeconomic policy. We've been able to manage to reduce our debt to GDP ratio from 100% back on the year of 2000 to become less than 24%. And one of the reasons is because we put in our law that the maximum budget deficit is 3%. If go beyond 3%, the president could be impeached. So the prudent fiscal policy is already inherent in our system. So by doing this, we have this room, much room for this, fiscal expansion in the future. The other reason, which makes the Indonesia's become also very important, is the political stability. I do believe that the wind of change, like it or not, will happen anywhere in the world. And we've been through the worst, from the authoritarian regime into democracy back on 1998. In 4 years, we had 4 presidents. It was very difficult to have the stable macroeconomic policy at the time. But now our political stability is relatively okay. So we can set the good policy. But this is not enough. Why? Because one day, if the other part of the world is back into the normal, then the investor will start to look at, maybe not going to invest in the emerging market, but maybe in Europe or the US. So we have to do something. So a series of reform have been undertaken in my office. First, for example, streamlining of the regulations. You know, last year, if you want to invest in Indonesia, you have to fill 38 forms. I myself will get headache if I have to fill 38 forms. Now I cut it by half to make it less than 15 forms that you have to fill.
So that's probably the point Mr. Whitwell was making there in terms of what governments could do to promote further was to make it easier.
It's easy, you know, and also the transparent. I borrow this idea from Amazon. You know, if you buy a book from Amazon, they always provide you with the URL. Then you can trace about the status of your book. Now, if the investors come to Indonesia, we'll give them PIN, and they can trace in which table the document. So if stuck in one table for 3 days, they can come to us and complain. I know the investors are professional complainers, so I let them to complain, to channel their hobby. So by making this process become very transparent, then you give a signal that you are friendly to the foreign investor. And last but not least, we are working on this revising of the negative list of investment. With this, the new list, negative list of investment will become more investor friendly. So I hope by doing this will send a signal that in the future, the comparative advantage will no longer the physical asset, but intangible asset in terms of the policy competitiveness.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. I mean, I think we're obviously running tight on time now, and I would like to open up this discussion to the floor because we're very fortunate here to have both Mr. Whitwell from AIG and also Ms. Elmalem from Bombardier. I'm sure there's going to be questions that are coming from the floor to understand a bit more about what's driving their investments. To recap on kind of what we've heard, though, as I understood, Greenfield investment's not going away. We're definitely seeing an increase in inter-regional investment, particularly in emerging markets. We seem to see that's a big growth opportunity there. We've heard some of the pull factors and push factors from Bombardier as well in terms of why they selected a particular location. We've also had the similar in terms of characteristics from AIG. Thank you very much for your brief kind of understanding of Turkey, credibility, predictability. I think those are two key aspects that came out from your particular points that you raised there. I think from South Africa's side, I think, again, there's a big picture that's being created there. It is part of, it's not brick, it is bricks. And I think that message needs to be relayed much further. And again, Dr. Bajie, I don't think I'd ever refer to Indonesia as being the most unattractive place to be, but I thank you for your frankness. But also, I think we need to make sure these type of discussions are kept very much to engage people. So thank you for that. Is there any questions from the floor? Is there any questions people would like to raise with the panelists here? There's one at the front here, and there's another one over there. Can we start with this one here, then we'll come across to you, sir.